Maybe still be backed up to date, but hopefully this will make things get better as we go on. Hopefully more people will know about the ticketing system. And the nightmare become less and less. That's the theory anyways. So unfortunately, that's what you have to do. Yeah.
How many are you going to let in each night?
Well, we're kicking around probably 230. It was 200 at a time last year. The problem is that we're so damn popular that the first 200 people showed up and ran the gate by 7:45, and they stayed all night.
Yeah.
And very, very few people would go out. And with the old system, it was one out, one in. So the commissioners would wait till one car of 3 people went out, and that one car with 3 or 4 people go back in to kind of keep it around the 200 person limit. But almost nobody went home because, I mean, most of the time they arrive in the daytime. They tour the CU and they kind of look around and look through the solar telescopes. But what they really want to do is nighttime stuff. So 200 people would show up at the beginning of the evening, stay out all night, and nobody else could get in. So we're probably going to expand it a little bit over 200 to sort of make up for the fact that we can't let anyone else in later on in the evening. And also to help make up for any special guests that we might have or special interest groups. Like sometimes we have a group of brownies or something that want to come up, or a small group. So that going a little over the 200 will sort of make it easier to accommodate some of the special groups. So not 100% guaranteed, but probably around 230 or something is what we're thinking this year. Yeah.
Where would the tickets be available? Or would it be online? Online?
Yeah, online. On Eventbrite. Well, once we sort of have it all hammered up, that's sort of got the framework of the Eventbrite page kind of up already. And we're going to sort of fine tune that. And then once it's up and ready to go, I'll share that with you guys, and then it'll go live to the public. And that's why it's really important to try and get the word out. We're going to have the Eventbrite page on that poster that we had printed up last year, and it'll be on the website. And again, Chris will mention it on media releases and all that. You just know that there's people that are just going to say, hey, what are we going to do next? Let's go to the observatory. It's going to rock up there and not even know about it. So going to try and get the word out, and then just sort of deal with the people that show up without tickets the best we can.
So that's Eventbrite on the RASC site, or just?
We'll put the link to Eventbrite on the RASC site, but Eventbrite is a separate entity all on its own. Yes, we will definitely put the link there. We'll put it on posters. We'll even hire a plane and skywrite it. But it's really important just to get that out.
Does that include the Astronomy Day night as well? I guess it does.
Yeah.
So that's starting from that one.
Starting from the 14th, Astronomy Day evening at the Hill. Otherwise, it's just going to be, nightmare. I mean, I'm actually surprised we didn't have any collisions or any major problems that way last year, because there was just so many cars and just no way to place it, absolutely no way to place it. And people are getting upset with us, and I mean, it wasn't really our doing, except everybody likes us so much that they just showed up in droves and nobody wanted to go home. You can't fault us for that, but at the same time, it just really isn't the kind of facilities geared to that much traffic. So we had to do something, and this is kind of the best thing we could come up with. Try and get the word out if you can. Treasurer's report, Bruce.
My name is Bruce Lane, your treasurer. I stand up, but I don't want to knock poor Nelson here into the chasm. Our members' account stands at $12,535. Our gaming account at $584, pending any more raffle sales. Okay, if you want to sell some more raffle tickets, got a few more in my bag here if you want to get some. Sell them. Our charity return went in last month. I haven't gotten any horrible return from it yet, so that's always a good sign. So just wait and see until I actually get the statement saying how awesome it got done for Oops, one of the two. So I just have to wait on that for the mail. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. Anything from you, Les?
No report.
Michelle is not. I think Michelle's at sea, so no VP report. Chris.
Okay, so membership is currently 227.
Wow.
And there are 16 people whose membership have expired in the last 2 months. So those could come off if they don't renew.
And we don't want that, do we?
Yeah.
Make sure you get your memberships in on time. Otherwise, we'll have to come looking for you. And nobody wants it. Reg, anything about the Sky News?
Hello, everyone. As episode 377 of Sky News is devoted to the Galactic Center, and our March episode or meeting, we had a very interesting discussion by James. Well, he presented some groundbreaking results that I had certainly was not aware of, and this inspired an internet journey for me. So there's an article on there about the Event Horizons telescope, but basically what it is some highlights of James's talk with a whole pile of hyperlinks. So if you get on a web rather than a paper copy of this, you can jump around to all sorts of articles. There's some wonderful movies there and things like that. And about 3 days after James's talk, there was a kind of an announcement from a group that studies gamma rays, that they have found a very intense gamma ray source right at the galactic center, which really fits in with the New Event Horizon telescope. So the two pair themselves together. At any rate, some really exciting stuff there. And also, we had a contribution from Dorothy Paul on light pollution, and
not from me, it's from the federal government.
Well,
All the arms.
Yeah,
All the
she
input.
gave me a very passionate call saying we've got to get this in there, so please check that out as well. And I've got about 8 or 9 copies of this report. The last month sold out, so anyone after the meeting can please come and get a copy if they want. After that, we're exhausted. I might only have 7 copies, I've come to think of it, so. That's it.
That's a really good issue again this time, Reg. Thanks.
I might just follow up. Notice this little item that I put in there that actually I was alerted to through the National Committee, and pointed out to your neighbors, because this is for all Canadians, not just astronomers. And this is actually where we have a chance to reduce light pollution without making it sound as though it's just for our love of dark skies, because there are more reasons than that. Profound
Is that the
reasons.
same thing that you sent me in the email?
Yes, right.
Yeah, I'm gonna post that on our website too,
Yeah, good.
just so everybody can have a look at that.
Yeah, well,
And I'm pretty sure there's gonna be an email thing going around among center presidents. There's a separate center president email list that goes around, and I'm pretty sure we'll be seeing something on that soon, so.
yeah, well, if not, maybe you could send it, because I didn't want to take time for this, but I made the suggestion to the National Committee that we get out that maybe the RAS National could send to all members, or RASC members, this notice that this was an opportunity. And the National Committee is absolutely swamped with some really neat and important things. And I have not gotten any feedback from this idea that I sent out. And I thought, well, we can start it in the Victoria Center. So I don't know whether other centers have taken the initiative or know about this. So that's why I made that suggestion to you.
I'll track it down in the next couple of days
Yeah.
and just see where everybody's at, but I'll definitely put it on our website just
We have
to get
to
our
little
locating.
meetings,
Yeah. Okay, good, yeah. Okay, thanks, Reg. Star Party, finally, after like 5 weeks or something, Machosen finally approved our request for the Star Party field. I mean, it used to be when I went to Machosen to plead our case, they would decide right on that night. This time, for whatever reason, they decided to drag it out through their finance committee and whatever, and then ratify it. It just went on and on. Anyways, finally, out of the blue, I get an email saying that they approved our waiver of fee, so the Star Party is on. Need to find some guest speakers, but otherwise that's all under control. So finally, good news to report on that. Sid, school programs.
School program is almost winding down. There's only 2 more students to come, and we had one on Monday, and we got tomorrow. It's 12:15, Laurie. It's not 1 o'clock. I'm sorry before I gave you the wrong time. So it's simply quiet.
Any other evening outreach with schools or anything, or?
Yeah, we have big night sky view coming on May 12th, so I will be reaching number of volunteers.
Can you add
That's the
26
North
Galileo
Stanage,
moments?
North Stanage Middle School, they are sleepover,
Okay.
and so there will be about 60, 100 people.
Well, it'd be clear.
Yeah, oh, it's going to be clear.
If you could add 26 from a thing I did last night to your Galileo moments.
Oh, wonderful, at the cuts,
The beavers,
for the beavers, yeah.
yellow beavers, yeah, and Sanger.
For the rest of the group, Be Free this year, Greg Hicks is taking charge of volunteering,
Good.
arranging the Beavery at Kimberley.
Yeah, they're always fun, they don't really understand what's going on, but they're fun anyways. I've kind of already covered pretty much everything about the summer Saturdays. We're chipping away at it, the plans are pretty much coming together. We've more or less reached an agreement with NRC, and Dennis Crabtree's approved the program that we want to run this summer. Nelson has been good enough to make all the arrangements for the volunteers for Astronomy Day and for and David, is David here? David's not here. David's been doing a lot of work getting the guest speakers. So between Nelson getting the volunteers and David getting the guest speakers, that's been an enormous help to me because it's allowed me to kind of do the rest of the negotiating with NRC. So everything is pretty much a go at this point. Again, the ticketing system will work on that and get that going, but we've got really good guest speakers for Astronomy Day, which, if you don't know, is going to be 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the BC Museum downtown. And we've even got the Planetary Society joining us for the first time this year. So that's kind of cool. So if you're not volunteering, come down and have a look and stop by. And then we've got the Hill of Evening for the first of the 13 summer Saturdays. So it all kicks off in about like a month tomorrow. So it's getting close, but finally it's under control, I think. I'm pretty sure it is. Joe, anything with the website?
Not too much. I have several members are now contributing to the website through using WordPress, and that's working out pretty well, lightening my load and letting people post things a little more quickly than that might otherwise happen. Thank you.
Good, thanks. Matt?
I'll add to that a little bit with some stats. We had 1,361 visits from 1,083 users in the last month, that being March 1st to 31st. Average session duration, minute and a half. It's pretty much the same as every other month, which is great. Consistent usage. Had a little bit of downtime, unexpected, with it only affected those of us who have logins. Everyone else didn't even notice a thing, which is why I was so confused initially when I saw the report, looked at my phone and said, "What are you talking about? It's working just fine."
Do we know what the problem was?
A hiccup on my server. Beyond that, as Sherry mentioned, just working out final details for the Eventbrite system. It's going to be set up so that users can purchase basically a week or two in advance. We're going to work out those little details, but not flood with advanced bookings and then people not showing up. It's going to be very, very automated with lots of people who sign up at each given event, getting an email reminder beforehand. All kinds of little things we can tweak there. No, it's going to be very popular and hopefully work out as a good system. VCO stuff, nothing really new to report other than we finally purchased the Sky X with the new camera add-on, the new T-Point add-on, which should improve tracking as an ongoing basis. The old version only improved tracking on the acquisition of the target, not following it. So that's a new improvement there. Have a new computer going up there with solid state drive on it, so it'll be much speedier. All kinds of things going on there. That's all to report.
Good, thanks, Matt. Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments or anything to add to the proceedings? Ken?
The transit of Mercury will be happening on May the 9th.
Right.
It's Monday, May the 9th, so I will be up on Mount Tommy. Transit's supposed to start when the sun rises. I'll be in progress when the sun rises. I'll be up there for 2 or 3 hours. Anybody retired or anybody else want to join me, you're more than welcome.
I forgot all about that. I should maybe post that on the website too, just for people, because unfortunately it's kind of well underway at sunrise, isn't it?
Yeah, it should be in progress as the sun rises, yeah, but it
It's
lasts,
really
I think,
fun.
7 or 8 hours.
Yeah, that's right. It's really fun, but Mercury is so much smaller. It's not quite as kind
Hard
of
to
wow factor as the Venus one was. But it's still worth seeing if you happen to be up at that hour. And that's not my kind of hour. I'm still listening at sunrise. But yeah, I'm sure maybe post something on that just as a reminder too. Nelson.
Hi, for Astronomy Day, which is on the 14th, we could still use some more volunteers. There's several people that are ignoring my emails and phone messages, so I'll pass this around. And during the talk, anybody that's interested, this is an important event for us each year, and one of our more successful outreach endeavors. We got a great venue at the museum and lots of help and cooperation from them. So,
Yeah.
which folks are you visiting? May 14th.
Yeah, month tomorrow actually. Yeah. So on the Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
And then Saturday night, same thing with Cherry Podcast.
Yeah. So thank you, Nelson, for taking the lead on the volunteers and stuff. That's been a huge help. So anything else from anyone? Questions, comments? So just before we get to our guest speaker, just a reminder that for those of you who don't know, after the meeting, we head upstairs to the Astronomy Lounge in the other part of the Elliott building for coffee and cookies. So it's very informal. Come on up and we can have some chat, and we'll be working on that Eventbrite thing up there too. So everyone's welcome. Come on up and some really good coffee and cookies up there. Is Michelle up there doing that now? Or
He's at sea. I'm going to be leading up. I'm going to be starting the coffee, so I'll be leading for question.
You make even better coffee than he does, so that's good to hear.
Zing.
Okay, there's nothing else, and we get to the good part of the evening, which is our guest speaker tonight. Okay, Dylan. Oh, yeah.
Nationals.
Oh, right, national stuff. Sorry.
Hi, Lori Roche, National Rep. I just want to let people know, of course, that the event, AstroCats and the General Assembly is going to be in London, Ontario, starting on the 19th of May. And Chris and I would sure like to have some people come with us, right?
Yeah.
Would be really nice to have that. Should be really fun. I actually wish there were more people to do the AstroCats whole thing, because that's going to be just terrific. And I'm not really the tech person to go and take all that in. So I'm feeling I'll get as much information as I can for you though. I just wanted to let you know that Dorothy and David and I we're here, actually in this room, on Sunday for the science fair that was here. And we gave 2 prizes this year to a young man who was in grade 6 and another young lady who was in grade 9. Grade 7. Grade 7?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I thought it was older than that. Okay. Anyway, and we have invited the 2 young people to come, I've invited the 2 young people to come and to show their projects. I'm not going to give them a presentation because they're fairly young. We've had presentations before from some of the older senior students, and that's it's a bit intimidating to have to do that if you're only like 11 years old, 10 years old to have to do this. So I would like them to come and bring their projects and have you at least go and say hello and kind of read a little bit about what they do, and they're both very keen and would like to talk to you about their project. So I've just asked them for next May, for May, if I could do that for just outside the room there at the A104. They can just set their things up and I'd be giving them that. So they got their surprise. It was really interesting. We didn't have quite the senior students didn't come through as the past couple of years, but we've had some really fabulous projects coming. Didn't quite get that level of
Would they be interested in an astronomy day, setting up their booth?
Dorothy is saying no.
I'd just like to add, I mean,
Yes,
what
yes,
Laurie
yes.
said is absolutely right on, but we actually, unless change this afterwards, they were honorable mentions.
Yes, they were honorable mentions.
Because although both are really keen about astronomy, as we found out talking to them, both projects had some serious, had at least one serious problem sort of scientifically. And we've had very high quality first prizes before, and we want to keep those standards up.
Right.
So what they're getting are a 1 year subscription to Sky News.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I felt, and I think David and Laurie did too, that they're going to be really enthusiastic about getting their own subscription to an astronomy magazine. They both, independent of their projects, expressed interest in astronomy. And one of them, the older one, is actually may show up at Astronomy Cafe with her parents, and she can bring them there because they got a little telescope and then they couldn't see the stars with it. And she wrote down our website and she was really interested in our activities. So I think it's really worth $34 for 2 subscriptions to Sky News to keep their interest up, but they weren't up to the standards that we have.
Yeah, I totally see that, and I would have said yes to other years, but this year, I'm not sure about that. But I would invite them for sure to make sure that they come. Yes, yeah, but to present, I think it would be interesting for people to see them, but to actually present them in front of the public, I think that's
Yeah, and to get some here to see, because I think they're interesting.
And I just want to ask, thank you, Diane Bell, because I was not able to stay for the award ceremony, and Diane did a fabulous job, I heard, of giving the award tonight. So thank you very much.
If you have ever seen 200 or more, 300, 400, very enthusiastic kids, that was an incredible treat. So thank you for asking.
What was the name of the science fair?
Vancouver Island Regional Science Fair. Yeah.
Thanks, Lori, sorry about that.
It's okay.
Okay, so tonight's special guest is Dr. Helen Kirk. Dr. Kirk is a research associate with the Hertzberg Astrophysics Program at the National Research Council of Canada. She's previously worked as a researcher at Master and Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. And prior to that, she obtained her master's and doctorate at the University of Victoria. Helen is thrilled to have been honored with 2 awards associated with the RASC. In 2010, she received the Plaskett Medal, a joint CASCA-RASC award for the best Canadian astronomy thesis in the past 2 years. And in 2003, she received the RASC Gold Award from the Toronto Centre for high achievement in undergraduate in astronomy at the University of Toronto. So please welcome Dr. Helen Kirk.
So thank you very much. I'm fighting off a bit of a cold, so my apologies if I get a little quiet partway through, but can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, okay, great. So I wanted to talk to you today about sort of the broad area that my research fits into. So I study how stars are born, and I'm going to talk to you today about what we can learn from looking at information from the James Clerk Maxwell Telescope and also the Herschel Space Observatory. So just to start off, I thought I'd give us a sense of perspective for where we are for star formation. So we all know that we live on the Earth, and it's about 10,000 kilometers across. We zoom out a bit. Here's a schematic of the solar system. So I should point out that the scales for the distances between planets and the size that's used to describe each planet or the sun are different. So all the planets in the sun have been blown up by a factor of 1,000. So you can see that even in our solar system, things are really far apart. The Earth is some little dot. You're not going to be able to see it down in that red circle there. If we zoom out even further, this is our conception of what we think our galaxy looks like. It's a bit hard to know exactly because we live in the middle of it. But we think it looks something like this. So fairly thin, kind of like a pancake with a thicker bit in the middle. It's kind of like a blob of whipped cream. And then there's these arms of pancakeness, and we live kind of on the edge of one of those arms. So we live somewhere in that circle there, kind of, out in the suburbs of the galaxy. And when I talk about studying the nearby star formation, I'm talking about within about a fifth of that circle. So really close by galactically, but we can learn a lot just looking at things that close by because we can actually resolve things better. So we can see smaller scale details than we would be able to with things that are further away. And this ties in well, I think, with James's talk last month, in that, as you can see from the picture, stuff going on in the middle there is quite different than the rest. We can learn quite a lot from here what's going on just about everywhere other than the center. So it's a good place to be looking. And the other thing I wanted to do before I jump right into the actual science and pictures is to just give you a bit of a primer about astronomy outside the optical wavelength. So I know everyone here does a lot with looking through your telescope and what beautiful, amazing things you see. But of course, we know that wave is a light, and there's lots of different ranges of colors or wavelengths of light beyond what our eye can see, and we can learn a lot of information from those scales. So if we go blueward to shorter wavelengths from what the human eye can see, we've got ultraviolet, we've got X-rays, we've got gamma rays, and then if we go to longer wavelengths than what we can see in the red, we get infrared, microwave, radio waves. And you can learn different things by looking at these different colors or different wavelengths of light. And so one important thing that you can access by looking at different colors of light is often bodies in the universe, when they're just radiating heat, just like your oven does, they give off most of their light at a very characteristic wavelength or color of light. And so if you're trying to look at something that's very cold, you kind of have to pick what wavelength you're looking at in order to actually see anything coming out of it. So that's what this last graphic down here is trying to show. Oh, the end of my slides cut off. That's unfortunate. At any rate, so if you're looking at something that's kind of room temperature, you're looking at things that you can see with your eye. But if you're looking at really cold things giving off just a tiny little bit of heat, like molecular clouds where stars are born are like, you're kind of down in this regime where you're in the infrared or even sub-millimeter wavelengths, which you can't see with your eyes. So you really need to start looking at telescopes that probe non-optical light. And just to give a kind of silly example for how you can see different things depending on what wavelength you're looking at, this is a picture put out by the NASA Spitzer group. And on the left, obviously, this is just what your human eye would see. There's a guy with a bag over his hand. And then if you look at it in the infrared, you see something very different. You can actually see his hand. And the reason for that is that the heat from his hand doesn't really care that the bag's there, and it just goes through to the camera on the other end. And so you can see that by combining the two pictures, I'm getting a much better idea of what's actually going on than I would by just looking at one picture or the other picture. And the physics is a little bit different, but we have a sort of analogous situation in star formation, in that when we look at these regions that stars are forming in, so this is an optical picture, kind of in a bluish color, of looking at one of these blobs of gas and dust that's going to form stars, and I'll get back to what goes on with those more a bit later. But what you can see is that there's a big dark patch in the middle. And that's not because there's no stars there, it's because there's stuff that's in the way of the starlight that's behind it. And that's because there's actually most of the material that's forming stars is gas, but there's about 1% dust. And that dust is very good at scattering light away. And it's particularly good at scattering bluer types of light. So as you look at redder and redder kinds of light, you can start to see more and more of the background light shining through the object. And so you can build up a better picture of what this region actually looks like if you can put together a composite of all these wavelengths. And in fact, if you go look at long enough wavelengths that you're really probing things that are very cold, you can actually see the dust giving off its own heat. It's only about 10 or 20 degrees above absolute zero, so we're talking about minus 200 or so, really cold, but it is giving off a little bit of heat. And if I look in the submillimeter, I can actually see that dust glowing. So instead of the dark patch, I'd actually be seeing a bright patch in the middle where the dust is giving off light. So this ties into how we look at star formation and try to understand what's going on. So we kind of need to put together this multi-wavelength picture. So again, starting at the big picture, what's the first stage of how stars form? Well, I need to gather a bunch of gas and dust together in order to have stuff to form stars out of. So again, this is a picture in the optical, and you can see again, these dark patches are where there's more denser stuff that's blocking out the starlight from behind it. So that's the first step. And these things are several light years across and tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of times the mass of our sun, so pretty big systems. Within those, there's also denser pockets that are going to condense down into smaller and smaller substructures. And basically, we see structures on a bunch of scales, but the very smallest and densest of these are something that we call a dense core, which is one of these kind of circular-ish blobs on this picture. And they're very cold, and they have about the same mass as a star, like our sun, and they're about 1/10 of a light year across. And so, as I said earlier, where these birthplaces of stars are very, very cold. So here I'm looking at millimeter light, so I'm looking at this very weak amount of thermal radiation, just heat being given off by these dust clouds that are not very much above absolute zero. Moving along to a bit later, eventually some of these blobs, these dense cores, gravity's going to take over and it's going to start to collapse and you're going to have a star start to form. And when that happens, it's actually going to start heating up its environment a little. I mean, it's still not hot, but it's much hotter than it was before. So you might get 100, 200 Kelvin, so still minus 100 Celsius or so, so not exactly warm, but much warmer than before. And now it starts heating up its surroundings, and you can see it much better in infrared wavelengths, because that's tracing, those shorter wavelengths are tracing the things that are a little bit hotter. And so as you might have guessed, if I'm trying to look at all these different wavelengths or colors of light in order to get the full picture of what's going on, I need different telescopes to do that. So 3 very popular telescopes we kind of use them together to get a full picture of what's going on. There's the Spitzer Space Telescope, shown on the top there, and that's probing really the nearest infrared, looking at the hottest component of star formation. So this is when the young stars have turned on and they're kind of lighting up their surroundings. We've also used the Herschel Space Telescope, this bigger one down here, and that's looking at slightly longer wavelengths, so slightly colder gas. So this might be just when star formation is getting started, or even some of the cold stuff before you really get too many stars forming. And then finally, at the very longest wavelength, we have the JCMT, which is a ground-based telescope in Hawaii. And that one is looking again at this very cold gas and dust, really tracing the stages before you've started having any stars turn on. And we really want to combine them all together to get a full picture of what's going on. And just to show you a bit of what I mean, here's a nice picture that probably all of you are familiar with, the Orion constellation and the beautiful Orion Nebula that you can see in the optical. And this is the same part of the sky seen in near infrared with the RASC space telescope taken a number of years ago. And you can see already you're seeing quite different things in the 2 pictures. And if I go now to slightly longer wavelengths, here's what Spitzer sees of roughly the same region. And going on a bit further, zooming in a bit, this is the view from Herschel, so slightly longer wavelengths again. And then finally, this is what JCMT sees. So often when we're looking at regions that are forming stars, we don't catch them before the first star is formed. There's already pockets where stars are starting to form, and then other pockets where stars haven't formed, and so it's kind of this big messy thing. And so you really need to be putting together all these different pictures to get a full idea of what's going on in every single part of the cloud. And you can see from all these pictures that you're seeing very different pieces of what's going on, and you really need to put it all together to figure things out. So we have a basic idea of how stars are formed, but there's a lot of questions we still don't know the answer to yet. And some of these questions are things like, what are the processes that actually shape these big clouds that stars are going to form out of? And how do they influence the actual formation of these dense cores? And how do they influence the properties of the stars that are eventually going to form? And so some of the things that we think are probably important, but we don't know exactly how important relative to each other they are. There's gravity, magnetic fields, turbulent motion, and stellar heating. And they may be different amounts of importance depending on where you're looking to, so it's complicated trying to sort this all out. So what I wanted to show you next was some really, I guess, within the last 2 years or so, hot topics and what we're starting to learn and open questions we still have in the field. So the first is something that we learned when the Herschel Space Telescope first sent back its first images. So this image on the left here is a picture from an older instrument on the JCNT. So this is showing you again the very long wavelength, the cold dust and gas. And it's not quite as sensitive as the instruments we have now. What you can see is, there's blobby stuff and there's a few filamenty things, but it's not spectacular when you compare it to this image of exactly the same region as we see with Herschel. So they're rotated a bit from each other, but this thing over here is this, and this is this, and this is this. So what Herschel's really showing us is that there are these filamentary structures basically on all scales everywhere. And we knew there were some filaments in star forming regions, but we didn't quite know that they were everywhere. So this has really sparked a massive, I guess, you could almost say revolution in the field, and now there's meetings just devoted to filaments and how do we understand what they are. So this is very exciting for people working in the field. And one of the first things that we seem to be getting evidence of is, you see all these filaments, but then the question is, are they just there because they're there, or are they actually important for what's going on? And so this is a bit of nice work from some people using the Herschel Space Telescope. So this is the IC 5146 region, this is the Cocoon Nebula and the Streamer. And again, you're seeing all these nice pretty filaments. And what they did was they wanted to go through and identify where are all the filaments, and then how are the dense cores where stars are forming related to these filaments, and is there anything special about the filaments that we see? And so this is kind of a slightly ugly transition, but basically they applied some fancy filtering to the map in order to find out exactly where the densest filamentary parts are. Those are all the blue lines on this image. And then they went back to the original image and they tried to look for where are all the dense cores. Are they lying on any filament? Are they lying off the filaments? Are they only lying on special filaments? And what they found out was that these star-forming cores were only found on filaments that look like they're gravitationally unstable. So that suggests that perhaps you need a filament first, and then when gravity's strong enough to break up my filament into little blobs, then I can actually start forming stars. So this, we're still trying to test this in a number of other regions, but the going theory now is that perhaps filaments are essential for forming individual stars, which is pretty exciting because we didn't know this 10 years ago at all. So this is very cool stuff. The second thing, if we move out to slightly larger size scales, is that when I look at clusters of stars or clusters of cores that are going to form stars, filaments also seem to be important on this scale. So this is a picture taken with Herschel. This is the Serpent South molecular cloud. So Herschel's near infrared, so it's not picking up the heat given off by these filaments, but it's instead the filaments are absorbing background starlight. And you can see it's perhaps a bit hard in the stretch, but there's this nice multi-filament system and this cluster in the center. And this happens to be a very young clustered system, which makes it particularly interesting to look at. But a lot of these young clustered systems, we tend to see these multiple filaments coming in on all sides of the clusters. And you think, well, again, is this coincidence or is this perhaps necessary? And what we see is if you look at the velocity of the material, so I did some work a few years ago studying this particular part down here, and we saw motions basically going in the direction of these arrows. So material is building up onto the filament, and then it's also moving along the filament into the central cluster. And so this has led to the suggestion of a bigger model or more general model that we haven't actually fully tested yet. But here's the cluster, and you have material flowing in from all the filamentary system, and then also just generally accreting onto the central cluster. So if this is true, this would be saying that in order to get a cluster, I can't just form a cluster anywhere. I have to have multiple filaments coming in on all sides and material whooshing in from all the filaments in order to actually get enough mass to form a cluster. And this is something we're still actively working on, trying to figure out if this is generally true or not. It's a bit hard to make these velocity measurements sometimes. But there is other suggestive evidence too. So this is some other work by Herschel. And so this is a pretty picture of the Rosette Nebula. So again, this is forming lots of stars, and we actually have a young cluster of stars out here somewhere that you can see sort of eroding the cloud face here. And what the group did here is, again, try to identify filaments. And I'm sorry, this is not a great picture. James is wincing already. Not my picture. But what they did was, again, apply some sort of filtering to try to enhance where are the filaments, and then they went back and looked at where are the young stars that are starting to form, and again, tried to see whether there was this coincidence between where I'm forming clusters of stars and where my filaments all come together. And it's a bit hard to look at, but one of the big clusters of stars is here, and you can see there's definitely multiple filaments flowing in. So this is still mostly circumstantial and suggestive, but a very active area of research, people trying to prove whether this hypothesis is true or not. Moving on to something slightly different, we can also look at where the masses of different cores or stars are within a cluster and try to understand whether there's anything special going on there, and perhaps, again, whether filaments are involved. So this is some work that I've been doing using JCNT, so again, very cold gas and dust radiating. And what you can see in this particular region, which is part of Orion B, is that there seem to be a number of sites where there's a whole bunch of clusters of blobs, clusters of things that are going to form stars. And we tried to analyze the clustering properties of all these clusters. And this plot's a little bit messy, but so ignore the red lines. But basically, we took each of these clustered regions that we saw and identified each of the blobs that look like they're going to form a star one day, and they're represented by circles. Bigger circles have more mass in them, so perhaps they will form bigger stars one day. And what we found is that the most massive star in each system, here indicated by the yellow circle, tend to be kind of in the middle of the clusters, which is perhaps indicating that that's a very preferential location for where I'm going to form my stars. Perhaps I can't form a big star anywhere. It has to be kind of in the middle of one of these clusters. And suggestively, again, there seem to be lots of filaments associated. So perhaps the reason that it's a special place is that filaments are bringing in material from all over the place, and only if you're in the center of the cluster where you're getting material coming in from lots of filaments do you ever get enough mass to form a big core, which can then go on to form a big star. So lots of suggestive evidence for what may be happening in filaments. There's still a lot of work we need to do, but this is the hot topic, I think, in star formation at the moment, and it's very exciting at the moment. So where do we go next? These are all very suggestive, but how do we prove these theories? So one important component is to actually measure the velocities of the gas. So if I see this nice filament, unless I can prove that there's actually stuff flowing along it into a cluster, then maybe it's just sitting there, it's coincidence. So we really need to start mapping out velocities of all these different systems in order to prove to ourselves that we understand what's going on. And so there's a big survey being led by Rachel Friesen, who used to be a graduate student here, looking at ammonia, which is a good tracer of dense gas motions. And so this is a collaboration between Canada, the USA, and Germany, and we're using a big radio facility in the States to try to map nearby filaments and understand them better. Also, a lot of the images from the JCNT that I showed you, those are helping us. They're part of a big survey called JCNT Global Belt Survey. So again, looking at nearby star forming regions, and here we're just characterizing column density information. But again, if we can get an accurate census of where are all these dense cores, where are all the blobs, where in relation to the filaments, we can start building up a cohesive picture of what's going on. And so a number of us here are involved in that, and in particular, James, who many of you know, is the Canadian coordinator for the survey. And then finally, we also have the Herschel Gould Belt survey, which is again looking at basically the same census of clouds because it's better to have multi-wavelength data, and looking at the slightly shorter wavelengths in order to, again, understand what's going on with the dense cores and the gas. And so I just wanted to point out that within Canada, we're actually really fortunate to have a very strong star formation community in Victoria, and much of the work that I showed you throughout this talk is from people who either are here, or here, or there's lots of other contributions by other people here. So Sarah's work I showed earlier on in the talk, she was a grad student here and is now in Germany. Me, James, these Doug and Brenda are also here. These are current grad students, and these are 2 undergrads who were working with us recently on some of this, and then these are 2 more staff members up at HIA. So it's a really big group and really exciting to be here. I think we've got by far the biggest group in Canada and fairly decent in the rest of the world, so it's a pretty nice group to be working with. So what's next? There's still lots to come, and we have just an absolute wealth of beautiful pictures and information that we've been getting from all these telescopes that we're still trying to understand. So there's lots more to do. Thank you very much.
So any questions for Dr. Kirk?
To the critically uninformed, these filaments look suspiciously like the same forms that we've been shown at these meetings for the formation of galaxy clusters. They look like a fractal with a representation of the bigger picture. And I'm sure that with all the smart people out there, nobody failed to miss that point. So what's going on between those 2 groups? They're looking at galaxies and looking at star formation using the same.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think filaments are still fairly new to the star formation community, so I think we still have a lot to learn from the extragalactic people on tools for analyzing filaments and understanding them. I mean, the scales are obviously very different. I mean, if you're forming a galaxy, your filaments are bigger than a galaxy, whereas these are tiny little pieces of a galaxy. And some of the physics is going to be somewhat different. For forming entire galaxies, we think that gravity is the most important part, and perhaps the only really interesting part. They're mostly dark matter systems. Whereas in our local filaments, we know that turbulent motions are important, gas pressure is important, magnetic fields might be important. So we perhaps have a little bit more physics to think about, but yes, to the eye, they look very similar. And I think we still have a bit more work to do trying to see what we can learn from all the decades that have been of exploration on the extragalactic side.
There are galaxies like Messier 82 is one they're called starburst galaxies because there seems to be an enormous amount of star formation going on. And I think I've heard that could have happened in our own galaxy at times. So there must be a connection between, there must have been a lot of filaments or bigger ones or something producing that too, if this is correct.
Yes, and it's also, the other possibility is that you may get into a different environmental regime at some point. So the galactic center seems to be quite different from the rest of our galaxy.
Could be a different way of forming it.
That's right. So I mean, it's, the pressures are much higher, the radiation field's much higher, densities are much higher. So it's possible that if you pack enough material down, you don't need filaments anymore, and you form by some completely other mode. I mean, I don't think we've seen a lot of, certainly junctions of filaments in the galactic center yet, and I would guess in other starbursts that might be the case. They're too far away for us to see filaments, so it's a bit harder.
You basically just need a way of getting a lot of mass in a small space. So there could be different mechanisms.
I don't know if Herschel's capable of seeing the gas bullets, but has there been any work done, say, if there's any relationship between the gas bullets and the filaments?
The dense cores, the things that are going to form individual stars?
The gas bullets are flying around like they've observed in Orion.
The bullets? I'm just trying to get I've
Yeah.
heard of the bullets and the dark matter sense, but that's a very different scale than.
I think there was a special survey that imaged the gas bullets about, it was like 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay. Guessing they're proplets. So what a proplet is basically you have a disk that's starting to form around a star, and then if you're in a very high ionization environment, like you are in the center of Orion, there's lots of big heavy stars that are giving off lots of stellar wind and lots of ionized radiation, you tend to start eroding those disks, and then you see these things that look kind of bullets, kind of like a tadpole shape, really, which are pretty spectacular, and mostly only found in Orion so far. And that's probably partially because it's the closest place that has enough stars that are bright enough to be giving off sufficient ionizing material to really do so much erosion. It's kind of our most example of exciting star formation. So those would be a smaller scale than our filaments, and we'd be getting multiple stars forming within the filament, and the disk is just a small bit around the star. So slightly different scale, but you could certainly get disks around stars in filaments, we'd expect that. But if you're still in the filament, it's pretty dense, you're not going to be exposed to all that ionizing radiation from the stars, so you're probably safe. You're not going to get the tadpole shape proplets.
You showed an image with a lot of vectors, motion vectors on them, and I was wondering how those vectors were determined.
Sure. So I didn't put up the pictures because I thought it might be a little too technical. We have different ways of measuring motions when we look at gas. So the basic idea is when you take a spectrum of a gas molecule, it emits at a very characteristic color unique to that molecule. And then if you see the color is shifted a bit, that's telling you about how much it's moved. So that's kind of, if we look at ammonia on this side and this side, and we see that where that peak, the color that the emission line is peaking at is shifted, that's telling us there's been motion between those two. So that's how we got this part. Getting this part was done a different way. It's a little more complicated, but if you have a system that is hotter in the middle and colder on the outside, and stuff is falling in toward the center, there's again a very characteristic shape to the spectrum that you see, and you can fit that spectrum and measure its speed and figure out whether it's going in or going out. They look very different, and so we kind of put the two together to get that motion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You showed a number of pictures that have these concentrations of gas, which you characterized as stars yet to be formed. But in reality, you actually don't know whether any given cloud or nodule or whatever it is they're technically called will actually become a star or not, do you? It's more difficult than that because there are, as you pointed out, there are several different physical forces that are at play, and any given cloud may or may not form a star, depending on exactly how it collapses and whether nuclear ignition ever
Yes,
is achieved.
that's generally true. But what we can do is we can measure the size and the amount of mass in something, and then we can look at other things like how hot is it, how much thermal pressure is going to move me up, versus how much is gravity swishing me down. You can measure other properties in the environment and get a pretty good handle of, if these ones have too much mass and too little space, gravity's going to win at some point. And then there are other ones that are big and fluffy, so that could expand again. It's, gravity isn't going to be strong enough at the moment to push it in. Maybe at some point, mass will flow in, there'll be some other process that will force it down, but maybe not. So we have a sense of which ones are most likely and which ones are not.
And so that kind of model has been applied to each of those clouds.
For this one, no. But some of them actually have very young stars that have already turned on. So in that case, there's already a star starting to form there. It's going to form at least one there. But we certainly could do that. To get an accurate picture, you need more information than we just get from this one observation, so we haven't done that yet.
Well, sure. In fact, that process, that climate collapse to nuclear fission and a star having formed is probably still fairly long-lived compared to a human life.
Oh, sure.
But it's relatively short-lived compared to a starlight. And you really don't know the details of what it takes to cause that to happen, which is why magnetic fields may be important, or the precise combination of factors.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of details.
Do we know well through the models about how the nuclear ignition begins? Does it begin over a broad core of the cloud, or does it begin in one point and sort of spreads as the temperature increases?
That's a little outside my expertise, but what I can say is they actually start shining before nuclear ignition. So as gravity is pulling all the material in, that actually starts generating heat on its own.
Sure.
And so they actually already start glowing and heating up their surroundings before they're actually fusing.
Well, that would be necessary for there to even be a possibility of nuclear ignition, so.
Right, but it's fairly substantial, and that's a fair phase on its
So
own. So normally, we don't even, star formation people don't even get to the stage where nuclear fusion's actually started. We're just looking at them when they're heating up still from material radiation. But at that point, we know what's going to happen, right? I mean, we're hot enough, everything is continuing to fall down, it's just a matter of time.
Okay, even though nobody's ever seen it.
Well, you're not seeing them in the clouds so much at that point. So as they start heating up, just from the gravitational energy that's released and they're radiating to their surroundings, that is starting to push away cloud material. So they become less embedded in their natal environment. And from my perspective, and I'm not really looking at initial conditions anymore, I can't figure out what the cloud looks like. The cloud's gone by the time they start doing it. So it's
As far as you're concerned, that's a star.
Yeah, it's going to be a
So the
star.
precise technical definition of the star isn't that important because it's a continuum.
That's
so
right.
it's
It's going to get there.
conventional stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Being an electrical guy, I'm always amazed that there's actually magnetic fields in space, because a magnetic field is actually generated when moving an electrical charge. Is this magnetic field very strong? Like, is it actually part of putting the filament together, or only when the filament's together is that a factor?
Magnetic fields are notoriously difficult to measure and to accurately quantify. So they're kind of the biggest question mark in star formation. We do see evidence of them, and I guess the strength is the hardest part to measure. So we can certainly see the direction of field lines at various stages. So when you have a very young star, often we see evidence for an hourglass shape that looks like, the field line's been dragged in by the gravity of the star. And at the stage of the filaments, sometimes, so not always, and we don't have a lot of data yet, but you see the magnetic field line aligned perpendicular to the filament. So that would suggest again that perhaps the magnetic field is saying, oh, material can't come in on any direction, it can only come in along the field lines, and that's what's making it filamentary shape.
So is a lot of the gas ionized then?
A small fraction, very small fraction. I mean, when we get into the dense environments, it's very hard to stay ionized or to get ionized because there's very little UV radiation or higher ionizing radiation that's able to penetrate that deep. So it's chemoline is neat or something, it's a very low fraction, but these things are pretty cold and there's not a lot going on, so it can still be important, even though there's not a lot of ionized material.
When you're trying to coordinate three different telescopes, I don't know enough about the process to know that when you started this, did you have that all completely in mind? You knew exactly what you were going to do, and you needed to do this at this time and this at this time, or all together? I didn't know what the process was, or how far in advance did you have to know all of this before you did it?
Right. Well, I guess it's been kind of a fluid thing. So, I mean, the telescopes got put up at very different times, and of course, space telescopes take a long time to actually get approved and launched. In one sense, it's oh, I went too far. Anyway, in one sense I went, it's easy. Most of these surveys looked at everything nearby. So everything within about 1,000 light years. There's not that many of them. We'll just map them all. And then we're gonna get a complete census. We know we're not missing anything. And then, the next telescope comes along 5 years later and it's still the obvious thing to do. I wanna see everything that's nearby so I can get as big a census as I can. So I think, we haven't always necessarily coordinated exact details, but in general, everyone's had the same guiding philosophy that, I want to map as much of each of these clouds as I can. They're all nearby ones. They're worth looking at in as much detail as we can. And to some extent, like the JCMT survey came along a bit after Herschel started taking data, so we could kind of refine where we were mapping a bit to say, okay, this part doesn't look like it's worthwhile. It actually isn't as interesting as we thought. We have limited telescope time. We'll do this other part instead. So where possible, coordinated, but often not a huge amount. I guess I can, I'll just add to that. The gas survey I mentioned, looking at ammonia, that was very explicitly based on the JCMT one. So in that case, we now have these nice maps. A lot of the same people are working on it. So I know, and it's very time consuming to take ammonia measurements, so I can't do as big an area. So that one's entirely based on where's the interesting stuff. We'll just focus on that small region because I already know where to look.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. This is a small token of our appreciation of your attendance tonight. Here very on RASC. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks. So don't forget coffee and cookies upstairs, basically right now. Thanks everyone for seeing.